I always put it on my Instagram. I figured a way to just kind of do it Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Hello to everyone and welcome Dr. Rob Kiltz on Kiltz's Keto Carnivore Conversations. And we have Sabrina Solt here with us, a doctor of natural
Naturopathic
naturopathy.
medicine.
Yes, and which is really such an important area, which I think we've been missing in our standard Western medical environment. Welcome, Sabrina, and tell us a little bit about yourself and help us learn more about the reason that naturopathy is such an important health and wellness modality.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we can, give your audience a ton of value today. Yes, like you said, I'm a naturopathic medical doctor. I'm located in Scottsdale, Arizona, and my main practice basically specializes a lot in regenerative and anti-aging medicine. So utilizing things like PRP, stem cells, other products to actually help people with recovering from musculoskeletal disorders. I also do a lot of hormone treatments, nutritional IV therapies. And I recently started adding in elements of carnivore and keto diets to my patients because I realized that this is the way to do it if we're really trying to get better results for people. So much of people's pain, and I deal with that a lot, is going to be coming from the inflammatory stuff that they put into their body every single day. And that's food, right? Or food-like things, as we like to call them over here. So that's a little bit about me.
So tell me a little bit about your training, where you trained and how you got into being a naturopathic doctor.
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from Canada, born and raised there. And when I was in high school, both my parents ended up with cancer, not at the same time, separate times. And it was really kind of fascinating because it kind of sent me on a trajectory of figuring out, well, what is health? How do we prevent even something like this from happening? And just through a series of very, fortunate things, I kind of found myself at naturopathic medicine. And to me, it really made sense because the whole premise behind it, the whole idea behind it is that you want to get to the root cause of why a person has a disease in the first place. So the best example I give people is, say you're suffering with headaches or migraines on a consistent basis. You go to your regular doctor and they're going to pick the best medication for you with all their training, right? Maybe it's a really intense NSAID or an anti-inflammatory, or maybe it's one of those really rare migraine medications that you can only take 1 or 2 of every single month, right? Instead, if you were to see something like a naturopathic doctor, we might sit down with you and say, wow, you're getting these headaches really consistently. Let's figure out what's happening in your diet, in your environment, in the rest of your life that's causing them in the first place. Fix that at the root so that you never have to deal with them ever again. So that's a little bit of the difference there. Now, I did my training at the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. It's located actually in Tempe, Arizona. And they actually have a new name now. They rebranded, I think, to some sort of health sciences university. So I'm not even quite sure what's happening there. But it was a great education. And for a lot of people that don't really know the difference between an education for a naturopathic doctor versus say an MD or a DO, a lot of similarities. You still have to do your 4-year undergraduate degree. So you still have to graduate with some sort of, bachelor's in science or something like that would feed into a medical school curriculum, still very high admission standards. And you still have to do medical school. So you're still doing all of your anatomies, your physiologies, your pharmacologies even, because ultimately we have to be physicians first. So that means understanding everything about medicine, being able to diagnose, being able to understand what the normal and regular treatment plans are, so that when you do get patients coming to you, you can still appropriately manage things, right? So you're not just irresponsibly dropping somebody off of an SSRI, day one, right? You understand how to actually taper people properly and really kind of use the synergy together. So full medical school curriculum, in addition to all the other natural therapeutics, right? So incorporating diet, even things like Chinese medicine. We learn a ton of nutrition, right? That's one of the things that really separated us from our counterparts, right? We understood that very, very deeply. And we actually got a lot of our nutrition even based on the biochemistry level. So, Krebs cycle, all those really great details. And the funny thing is that, of course, there was a ton of mention of eating lots of vegetables. The more vegetables you could get into a person, the better. And this is actually the funniest thing, and why I think that the ND community might disown me, because what I came to realize is that, yes, we get these patients in, and most of the time they're kind of really brand new into their medical and their health journey, and they'd be coming from the standard American diet. Let's be honest, vegetables are going to be a step above the standard American diet. So you get these doctors that are kind of switching their patients out of that, right? They're taking them off of those, very high amounts of sugar. They're taking them off of the PUFAs, right? The polyunsaturated fatty acids, the fried foods. And now they're substituting them with maybe leaner cuts of meat and vegetables, right? That's a ton of it. And they do get better, right? They do get some changes because there's different things happening physiologically. But this is what I've seen is that they don't get all the way better. Okay. I love all my patients, but if I did my job, it means I'd never have to see you again, right? Like, I don't want to see you again. I want you to be so well informed, so confident in your ability to make choices on a daily basis that you don't necessarily need me anymore, right? That's the goal of being healthy, is that you now have a body that responds exactly how and when you want it to on a daily basis, and that you don't need me. So that's always my goal, right? And I realized that when I'm getting these people on these diet changes, well, maybe their symptoms now changed, right? So maybe we got them sleeping better, but now they're having some digestive issues. Or maybe we got rid of their digestive issues, but now there's some sort of skin thing popping up, right? And it was they're never getting fully better. And in my head, I'm trying to make sense of this. And I'm like, well, what's happening? Maybe, are they lying to me? Right? That's always the first thing. It's like, oh, you're just not being truthful about your diet diaries, what you're actually eating. Maybe your stress levels are too high. Maybe. And it was always kind of chasing it, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, if we're talking root cause, if we're talking about the actual things that we need to get to the root of, we have to start with nutrition, right? It's very, the Hippocrates one, right? All disease starts in the gut. We got to start with the nutrition. Yeah.
So when did you first begin to integrate carnivore and or keto into your practice and get an understanding of the root cause?
The keto stuff I toyed with a couple years back, and it didn't do that great. People had a really hard time with compliance. I found that actually my women that were pre and post menopausal had a really difficult time with it, especially those who had thyroid issues. They just, for whatever reason, their bodies were just not responding adequately. And then at the beginning of the year, my husband, who you actually interviewed as well, he decided to give carnivore a try. And truthfully, I was like, that kind of sounds insane, because in my head, I'm brainwashed as an ND that you have to have all of the vegetables. A full plate of vegetables with all the raw spinach sprinkled on top was like the way to go. And so I first just start by observing him. And then I'm like, all right, let me just try cutting out salads, because I was eating a salad every single day. And I laugh now at just like the insanity of that. And as soon as I cut the salads out, I lost like this little belly pooch that I had. It was just gone. It was just gone, right? Like it was, so to me, I'm like, okay, this is pretty powerful. And so I'm just like slowly transitioning. And as I'm making these changes, I'm testing them on my patients, right? So fast forward, 6-7 months later, and pretty much all my patients get obviously taken off of vegetables fully. Nobody has complained and nobody has said they wanted to go back, right? And everybody's feeling good changes. And it's so crazy because I do a lot of work also with men with ED. And, you wouldn't believe the changes that guys can get just with these diet changes as well, too. I mean, I had this one patient and he thought that he was doing all of the right things, eating a big salad every day, handfuls of raw nuts, and drinking things like oat milk, soy milk. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, let's get some meat into you. Let's cut all these things out. And I really do think we're going to be able to get you your function fully back, because again, you remove the assaults. The body wants to be in a state of health and healing, right? As I'm sure you understand, every time the body goes into a state of dysfunction, it's actually due to the body trying to do something intelligently corrective, right? Maybe it doesn't do it very elegantly because it doesn't have, the right tools to do it, but it is an intelligent response. Blood pressure increases are an intelligent response. Blood sugar increases are an intelligent response. Laying down of cholesterol, plaque, those are intelligent responses that just went awry, right? Because the body's trying to compensate.
So what are your main, what is your practice mainly made up of? Who comes to you and for what reasons, and how do you approach them?
So Have you ever heard of the disease arachnoiditis? Arachnoiditis. It's a really
I bet I have,
severe,
but
yeah, it's a really severe spinal disease. We'll call it that. It happens to lots of patients, usually through no fault of their own. I see this a lot with women who have received epidurals that have kind of gone awry, people who've been in car accidents, people who have received spinal blocks for certain things. And basically what happens is that there ends up being this really painful inflammation of the arachnoid layer of the spinal canal, right? There's different layers that surround your spinal canal. And these nerves end up clumping together and causing so much dysfunction for these patients, right? So they, in very extreme cases, people can lose the ability to walk. They can lose the ability to control their urine, their defecation. They lose sexual function on top of having nerve pain. So this is the burning, shooting, really intense pain that unfortunately does not usually respond to our very common strong medications, right? Even a lot of opiates don't even work for these types of patients and their type of pain, because nerve pain is so very specific. Now, to talk about these types of patients, we use a lot of regenerative medicine for this because, again, we're trying to get the body to heal. But the diet changes that I like to use for these patients, and this is the way I frame it to them, is when we're trying to make your body actually heal and do something, we have to give it the tools to do it. It'd be like telling somebody, hey, go and build me a house, but not dropping off any shingles or 2x4s, right? You're just not going to be able to do it. Like maybe you crop some twigs and stuff, but it's going to be haphazard at best. So if we want to start rebuilding this tissue in the spinal regions or without the whole body, what do we need? We need protein, we need fat. What's the perfect diet for that? It's the carnivore diet. So we start getting these patients on a ton of saturated fat, right? And the beautiful thing about that is that, again, we're trying to help the body heal damaged nerves. All nerves are made of that myelin covering, right? Which is made of the cholesterol, those saturated fats, the beautiful stuff. And the healing happens so wonderfully. And it's because, again, we gave the body what it needed to do. We reduced other amounts of inflammation coming into the body from the things like the other plant matters. And by adding on the regenerative therapeutics to it, so things like PRP, stem cells that we can get from a person's own fat or a person's own bone marrow, you're really putting the body into a state where it can recover. And, I feel very grateful to be able to serve this population in the way that I do, because there are no other answers for them in the rest of the medical community, right? Instead, they usually get put on pain pumps. They get put on, again, plenty of opiates, things where they're just kind of left to continue to degenerate. And we know that situations like that, if you don't do something interventionally like this, they will only get worse. And to me, that's no way to live. So I would say that's probably the most extreme of the types of cases that I get. But I do, of course, get, just your regular old low back pain, shoulder issues, knee issues, what have you.
And I'm sure you're noticing, as I've noticed over the last many years now, that ultimately by simply removing plants, everyone gets better.
Yes, it does dramatically cut down on their pain or symptoms before they even come to see me, which is really cool. Usually I'm booked out about a month in advance or so. So in that time period, they have these instructions to start following this diet. And that's usually a meaningful amount of time to see some really great changes. So by the time they come to me, we've already peeled back so many layers. And it's just a matter of, okay, how are we going to accelerate this healing?
So I know, like me, it's sort of the your standard treatment, PRP, stem cells, and I'm sure people got better with that, but they probably still needed it over time, from time to time. They continued, and you're probably finding, as you said at the beginning, your job is to put you out of business, but the truth is that'll never happen, because
No.
there's too many of us that are eating the diet for pigs, cows, and sheeps, and not for the masters, the lions we truly are. It is amazing. What are your clients' community? What do they say to you? The patient side of it, and then obviously that there's the other practitioners who think you're kind of off your rocker.
Yeah, the patients, they always kind of look at me like I've got two heads when I say, I don't want you to eat any more vegetables. And they're like, none? Not even can I have onions when I cook? Can I, like, there's always these kind of qualifiers like, oh, but I love my salads. I'm like, but do you? Like, do you really? Like, I made this post, it was kind of a little tongue in cheek. And it was, kind of about how the eating vegetables is related to Stockholm syndrome. At first, you're introduced to vegetables as a kid and you're disgusted by them. You hate them. You want nothing to do with them. And then you grow to love your captors, right? It's vegetable induced Stockholm syndrome. So they come up resistant to me. And then I tell them what I actually do want them to eat. And they're like, oh, wait, I love meats. I love fat. Like, you mean I can eat bacon? What? No, doctor, will put about my cholesterol, right? And so it becomes really kind of fun to dispel these myths and actually see them get excited about the possibilities of what they can eat, because I think some of them probably think, oh my God, is she going to make me eat tofu? Like, is this where we're going? Was this the road we're going down? And, thankfully we don't. As far as other providers, it's really interesting. Being an ND, our world is already really weird. Like, when I was in school, we had all sorts of people on all sorts of crazy diets. I'll never forget, there was this one kid in my class, and he went through a fruitarian phase where he would literally just bring piles of fruit to school and kind of just spread them around him. So he would have a whole bunch of bananas, a whole bag of grapes, like, you name it. So in the ND community at large, we're already pretty weird.
Okay.
And I am a part of, some other medical communities. I was actually just at an event over this last weekend, and it's medical providers from all backgrounds, right? So we've got MDs, we got DOs, we got psychiatrists, we've even got a vet that joined the community now, right? And the cool thing about this particular community is that everybody's on some sort of weird diet. I was sitting there at lunch the other day, I only picked the meat that was being served to us. And then this other, provider, she literally only ate the raw vegetables and some avocado. And there was no discord, because, like, we get it. Like, you're going to do what's right for you. I might not necessarily agree with it, but I'm going to allow you the freedom of your choice. And should you ask me questions, I'm going to sit there and educate you, right, on why I'm deciding on this. And I think that it's also important to be able to open that without judgment, right? Because everybody's starting in a different place, and they just might not know. And I would never want to, shame somebody or put them down for their choices. I would rather lead with, hey, this is why I'm doing this. And if you want more information, happy to have that conversation.
Well, I always say, let's see, we do have a scientific background.
Mm-hmm.
So we're scientists first.
Yeah.
So where's the science of a plant-based diet? I always ask that question.
I know.
And so if we're so smart, why do we have such trouble in really opening up to something that is like, whoa, right?
Yeah. And I was just having, some of this conversation with someone else. People don't bat an eye when you hear of, like, vegan parents making their children be vegan. But, us as, carnivore parents making our kids be carnivore sounds crazy to them. And to me, we have to kind of get away from this idea that what's being broadcast in the mainstream might not always be the best choice or the best option, right? If there's a agenda behind things like pushing these impossible burgers and plant-based things, and this, lobbying is coming from these big companies like the soy industry, the corn industry, things like that, is that really something that is going to be beneficial for us humans? And then looking at the research and saying, who did sponsor this, right? If this study is saying that this impossible burger is so darn healthy for us, who funded that? Who's actually doing this level, right? Who's doing this level of manipulation? There's nobody that's necessarily funding the, ribeye studies, right? I would totally participate in that, but
dogs and cats are domesticated lions and wolves that are fed grass and grains. So when you're domesticated with plants, and if you look at the elephant, if you raise an elephant on a chain, and then eventually the chain is not there, but the elephant doesn't move. Essentially, we've all been imprisoned, enslaved. We're the peasants and we're the soldiers that will do anything the masters tell us to do. And plants make us meek. We're addicted to plants because they make us feel good. I call that heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine,
yes,
even a little bit of caffeine. But go ahead.
No, I completely agree. And so this is the other thing too, right? So when in ND school, we actually learned herbal medicine. That was part of our curriculum. I called it Potions class if you're a Harry Potter fan by any chance. But it's funny to me because we learn how all of these plants, right, have these pharmaceutical abilities to work in the body, how they bind to certain receptors, how they influence certain enzymes and everything like that. And it makes you wonder, oh, was it just these herbs, right, that had these medicinal properties, or do all plants exist on a spectrum of how they manipulate our physiology like that might not necessarily be in our best interest all the time, right? Like, so we wouldn't take something like, oh gosh, what's a good example? I have a supplement, I think it's right here. There's this one. Okay, so this has neem in it. It's an oil, and it's supposed to be for digestive stuff. But if you take too much of it, it can be damaging, right? There's also another medication. It's called Rauwolfia, and it's a cardiac medication. But in high doses, it can actually put somebody, really damage their cardiovascular system, right? And so if these things are only really applicable in certain time periods to possibly assist a dysfunction of some sort, couldn't we extrapolate that logic to the whole plant kingdom at large, right? And, I don't ever think that there might be an argument for oxalates or for lectins, for example, but, so like you were just saying, the marijuana, the nicotine, I know that, nicotine, for example, is useful in people who have ulcerative colitis. The previous recommendation used to be, go tell your patients to smoke cigarettes, but no, I think that's a fast way to malpractice. But again, that knowing that substance could have benefits in that patient population, maybe you use it as a short-term therapeutic while you work on the root cause of the colitis, right? Which could be, helped by the carnivore diet.
So the plants are the poisons that cause the diseases, and then we use the plants to make the drugs that help us manage the diseases, which ultimately are never cured, or we call them cured, but they're not really. And ultimately, all our diseases are simply we're being poisoned by plants. And it's
Agreed.
the simplistic Occam's razor is the simple answer is the one. And when I did this over 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I went 15 years ago, I was in the paleo keto world. Before that, it was Atkins. And not until I understood that ultimately plants are straight on poisonous for humanity. And nicotine was one of the first pesticides used by human agriculture to kill the pests. And
Yes.
and so, that is such an amazing environment. Are you still finding what are your thoughts on stem cells and PRP in their mechanism of function, and even those, because I'm finding for some people the damage is done so much, even on carnivore, they still need something. What are your thoughts on continuing with those modalities despite carnivore?
Yeah, I think that they're complementary because, again, I do get those patients that maybe they've made it into their fourth, fifth, sixth decade of life, and they've got literally decades of damage that have been done. And I think obviously diet changes are great, and you can really establish the basis for healing and giving your body the substrates it needs. But sometimes it just doesn't have the reserves or the ability to do that. So we all have stem cells in our body. They're in various types of tissues, and we all have growth factors that are present in our blood. Those levels can decrease over time. So when you're saying PRP, your audience might know, because I'm wondering if you actually use it for fertility because I have seen some research with using PRP as ovarian injections to help with, cool.
And testicular injections, both,
yes.
And uterine infusions.
Yep, totally on board. So PRP stands for platelet-rich plasma, something that we get from a patient's own blood. So no more difficult than a simple blood draw. The amount we take is usually maybe a tenth of what you give in a blood donation. It's not a hefty amount, but it's certainly enough for us to do something with it. We concentrate it. We allow the platelets to actually expand using very specific centrifuge settings. And what we're left with is this concentration of all of the growth and healing factors that are present in our blood. And you simply apply that somewhere that needs to be healed. And it's really quite elegant, right? So those growth factors, while there isn't really stem cells that are present in there, they can actually do what's called the paracrine effect, which is signaling to other cells, in addition to having the growth factors themselves present, which will allow that regeneration, that healing to happen. And, you know, there's various growth factors that are present, right? There's ones that'll help with tissue growth. There's ones that'll help with blood flow. And there's even types of growth factors that kind of misnomer, but they will take down tissue that shouldn't be there. So patients that have things like osteophytes, for example, which are bone spurs, you can actually inject PRP, and these types of growth factors that are responsible for removing bad tissue will actually break those down over time. And, you know, I see that a lot when I see, you know, osteophytes or bone spurs on people's supraspinatus tendons, which, you know, that's the most commonly torn rotator cuff tendon. The body will actually, again, intelligent response. It will create these little bone spurs as a way to strengthen the area. So fascinating there. With stem cells are really cool. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say bone marrow. You're doing bone marrow stem cells also?
Yeah, so you can get in the United States currently in clinical practice, we can get bone marrow from a person. We can also get stem cells from a patient's own fat, and we can use it as kind of like a graft into certain areas. And then there also is the donated tissue market. Now, there's a lot of kind of back and forth in this as far as, do these products actually contain live stem cells? Maybe some of them, some of the time, depending on the how they're produced, what the company's doing as far as sterilization, how it gets thawed in the office, how it gets stored. Not saying they're bad products by any means. I think that there is a set type of use for them, but we have to understand that they may or may not contain stem cells, which means they're not going to behave in the same way that a stem cell would. Now, the cool thing about stem cells is that they do behave in different ways. And when we're in clinical practice, we usually like to use the mesenchymal stem cells, which have the ability to turn into things like muscle, bone, nerve, cartilage, what have you. Whereas the other ones are the hematopoietic stem cells. And these are the ones that are most commonly found in bone marrow. There is a mesenchymal population there as well. But the bone marrow ones are mainly the hematopoietic, and those can turn into blood cell lineages. So they can still have great regenerative potential, but that's mainly that type. Now, the way that the stem cells work in a human body is very different than how they work in the Petri dish. So there's this gentleman named Dr. Arnold Kaplan, and he's actually the grandfather of stem cells. He actually holds the patent to the mesenchymal stem cell. And a few years back, I want to say maybe 2016 or 2018, something like that, he actually put out a position paper that said that mesenchymal stem cells, when they're used in the human body, should actually be referred to as medicinal signaling cells. So still MSC, but signaling instead of stemness, right? So stemness being this idea that the cell itself can actually turn into something else. And that only happens in a Petri dish. In the human body, when we apply these cells, a couple things happen. One, they can actually self-replicate. So they can make more of themselves in order to go throughout the body and spread around more, because they have this built-in mechanism that we can refer to as homing. So they will detect these inflammatory signals given off by damaged areas of the human body and actually be driven right to there. So we don't, precision application is of course much preferred, and I do everything with ultrasound guidance, but they will still home into these areas that are giving them off. Now, what do they do when they get there? Well, they kind of work as like a construction foreman as far as they survey the site and they see what it needs. So they will actually start to release other things. So they will release their own growth factors. They can also release cytokines, and they can also release things like exosomes. So the exosomes are these like small, very, very tiny cells that have a lot of signaling to them. And they'll contain things like microRNA, mRNA, and additional growth factors as well too. So that's one of the ways that they work. Another way that stem cells work is they actually have the ability to donate their mitochondria to cells in need. So we have this idea of cells that exist in this senescent state or this zombie-like state. Well, these stem cells can actually bring these back and revive them by giving their mitochondria to that cell, which I think is really, really cool. So another way that they work actually is that they actually have the ability to augment our immune system. So our immune system can have two basic states. It can kind of go wonky, the Th1, Th2 responses. These kind of go crazy in patients who have autoimmune disorders, but I would argue that anybody eating a plant-based diet has some sort of immune dysfunction anyway. And the stem cells do have the ability to kind of bring that back into balance in a really nice way. But again, all of this in the presence of doing a proper diet.
So essentially, using PRP or other stem cell sources, you may be actually turning on the body's and redirecting the body's own healing processes and you're sort of gaining. It's almost sort of a vitamin supplementation as we think of vitamins, and maybe bringing in some coaches and cheerleaders to help your body do the work it's capable of doing. Because we know that cancers heal. We know that people break bones and they heal. They get cuts and other injuries and they heal. So ultimately, your body is really, really capable of healing itself. The problem is that we're throwing so much inflammatory processes at it. It doesn't have. It never gets to heal it.
I
So
agree.
it heals. You break it down because you're eating plants. And I personally believe that a high protein, low fat diet is as deadly as a high carb, low fat diet, because people think that we need a lot of protein. We actually don't. We need fat. And your body's going to make it really nicely out of amino acids and simple sugars in the liver via insulin. And if you can't do that, you're gonna break down in so many ways. So, uh, uh, where do you practice primarily, and are you doing more and more sort of online internet health and wellness practice?
Yeah, so I have a brick and mortar in Scottsdale, Arizona, and this is where I see my patients in person. I do have some kind of, I'm actually in the midst of building my online back end. I'm actually taking a pretty big change in my brick and mortar as far as making actually a lot of online educational components a part of my in-person packages. So patient wants to come see me for some sort of procedure. Well, it's not just going to be you coming for the procedure. You have a whole 6-month program that you're going to be put on, which includes this carnivore diet, of course. And that way, I'm putting my name behind something that I can be really proud of, and I'm actually going to be getting you the results that you really want, but it takes time. And I think that that's, part of the paradigm that we have to change around how people think about healing and think about going to the doctor, is that it's not just, you walk in for 15 minutes, you get a prescription and then you're all better. Maybe you have a UTI, right? But that's not the situation with chronic diseases. You have to give your body time to heal. And, in ND school, we were taught this, rule of at least 1 month of healing for every year that you were ill. So that
Wow.
I sometimes kind of put that in perspective for patients.
I'm sure, like you, despite the fact that people were eating a plant-based diet, they would come to you and you do the treatments, but and they would get better. And so my sense is that the real thing that we forget is the human interaction, the coach, the cheerleader, because ultimately the most successful teams and people in the world have a coach and cheerleader, a mentor. And I think mentorship is something that we forget in medicine. And so in standard medicine, I'm going to give you a diagnosis list, a problem list, and I'm going to treat you with the diseases. And quite often, I'm going to chastise you for not making strides because I'm blaming you. But many doctors are quite good at how you doing. You look great. You feel great, even though you still have the diseases. And you may live longer and feel better even though you still have the diseases.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
agree.
I sense in all of this, like what we're doing and you're doing and so many others are doing, realizing that medicine and health and wellness in our health and wellness world is built in the people that practice it in order to motivate and inspire more and more people in this journey to heal. So tell us a little bit about your sort of how you've learned about that and maybe how you're integrating that more in your practice with your community.
Yeah. So the one thing I will tell you, and this is something that I learned early in my career. I was working for this facility, and they had a lot of patients coming in. They were working in the insurance model, and they were coming. It was an integrative rehab facility, right? So people were coming in with various musculoskeletal issues, and one of the common things that we saw was fibromyalgia, right? We know fibromyalgia, diagnosis of exclusion. You can't find anything else wrong with them. But the person has body-wide pain, right? That's the traditional way, right? Obviously, we would have a very different way of approaching it. But what I realized was that when these people came in with these diagnoses, and it started in my brain with fibromyalgia and picking up on this pattern, is that they held tight to the diagnosis, right? That became part of their identity. They were now this person that had this. And for them to imagine a life where that wasn't a thing, it would take away their full-on identity. So that to me really sparked something in this idea that people have such a high regard for physicians and what they tell them and what they're diagnosed with, that it's almost a disability that we're giving them by tying them to this diagnosis and making it a part of them. So I actually took the stance of, I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm going to tell you what it looks like it could be, what your labs might be suggesting to us. But I will not, except for, of course, legal charting things, tell a patient what their diagnosis is, because truthfully, we can just relate it back to, you just got some inflammation that went kind of haywire and we're going to fix it anyway. So I'll spend most of my time talking about where we're going to find you on the other side of working together. And it's not so much about where you're at now or having something tie you down to a specific disease state, because I think it's ultimately disempowering, right? I think that a lot of the time, at least some of the patients that I see, some of the things that they've been told me that other doctors have told them, you're never going to get better. You're going to be on this medication for the rest of your life. You should get your affairs in order. You're only going to get worse. And I wonder to myself, how can you possibly practice medicine like this? How can you possibly, to me, that's doing harm, right? First, do no harm. That's doing harm when you're disempowering your patient.
But it is interesting, and I'm not sure how you're finding this, for many patients and many people, just people, right? People that we care for, want to focus on the standard diagnosis and treatment, and find it hard to listen to this alternative path. What's your experience and thoughts on that?
I always invite them to experiment. That's how I word it. Just going to invite you to experiment. You don't have to listen to me. I don't have to be right. But if what you're doing right now isn't working for you, I'm just going to invite you. And I always phrase it to them, right? If everything that you were doing right now was working perfectly for you, you wouldn't be in my office. Sometimes that's just the reality check that they need. And that, it helps them see like, oh, maybe there's something to this, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results. And I do pre-frame a lot of my stuff, and the way the patients come to find me is that there's going to be work involved, right? I can give you a roadmap, but I can't drive you down the road. You have to take this journey for you. I'm going to be there as your guide, but I'm not going to be there as your savior, right? I'm not sure if you know who Donald Miller is. He has the brand Story brand, and it's how we all play 4 different roles, right? We can be the hero, we can be the guide, we can be the villain. There's one more that I'm missing, but a lot of us are the victim. And a lot of these patients, if they're stuck in that victim mentality, they're going to be looking for the hero. And it's not, I think, our job to be somebody's hero, because we can't save them, right? They can only save themselves. They have to be their own hero. We're going to be their guide. And I think that having a lot of doctors step into that and, release this kind of God complex that some of them might have, is that they're going to save this person, and just be their guide, invite them along on this journey, invite them into this experiment with you. And you know what? I always tell them, you can always go back. Once you cross over, you can still go back. Kale will always want to embrace you if you want. It's like, go back but they don't. They just don't.
Kale kills.
Yes, it does.
So it's
yes.
deadly, and we've all been there. How about you? You're married to Zach Solt, who's on this health and wellness and sharing his amazing journey. You have 2 children, is that right?
We do. We have 2. Yes, we have a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old.
And tell us how you sort of work this into your home life and personal life and your children's.
The kids have, so the youngest has been the easiest, because we really got to start carnivore with him when he was getting into food. So he really doesn't have a taste for any plant matter, which is fantastic. Not that we would give it to him anyway. Our daughter's a little bit more challenging, because she was raised with, you got to try your vegetables, you got to do this, you got to do that. So she has still, we'll call it a sweet tooth, where she wants to go for sugar. And we really do as much as we can to redirect it. So she'll ask for things like, sometimes she wants gluten-free pasta with butter on it for breakfast. And I'll be like, nope, we're just not going to do that anymore. But again, she was used to things for so many years that trying to recorrect it at this point has been a challenge, but not impossible. But she does love meat, right? So every day at lunch, my husband, he will make usually like a big ribeye, like something large enough that they can all share. And they crush it. And they crush it when it's rare or medium rare with like nobody's business. So they love it. They love what we actually eat on the diet. Baby's the easiest because he didn't know anything else. Her, we're having a little bit of a harder time with like the full transition. And, I think we will get there. But it's just, kids are tough because while they, have their intelligence and you can talk to them, it's hard to reason with them to a degree that's going to, allow them without just being like, I'm the parent, you must listen to me sort of thing.
You have to try Kiltz's ice cream if you haven't done it. It's just
I have not yet.
It's cream, eggs, cream's egg, a little bit of vanilla bean, or it's a little bit of dark chocolate shavings in it, and a little bit of cane sugar. And, I think the treats are good and rewards are good for all of us. We're human beings. We're in a human world. If it's sort of like you can never touch that. And I think the labels of you're an addict, you should never do this. I mean, it doesn't give us choice and enjoyment of life. I mean, we do go to the amusement park from time to time and we have fun, and so I think that's a critical thing in all of our lives. I know Zach does, I do some weights. Someone asked me on our Instagram, I do light weights. I do a little bit of biking. When I'm in Florida, I do more biking because on my lake in the Skinny Atlases, the cars zoom by, and I'm a little. I do less on the bikes and stuff. I do more in the painting and pottery studios and the creative studios, and more in the blogging studios than ever before. Where do you put physical exercise in your routine and your community recommendations?
I think that it's important to move your body as much as you can in a way that feels good and genuine to you and not like work. So if you enjoy working out in your yard and you would much rather do that than hit the weight section of a gym, do it. Just move your body, right? I personally come from also a fitness background. I did fitness competitions years ago. I don't do that anymore. Now I get to the gym when I can. And I don't put any pressure on myself to do it simply because I know that it's going to be something that's enjoyable for me. And I think that, there is importance to maintaining a good amount of muscle mass and to keep your heart healthy and to just make sure that you're getting actually the positive hormones that come from exercise, right? The BDNF, which is our brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is literally like miracle grow for our brains, that gets released during exercise, right? So we're doing all of these things for our ultimate good. And I always just want it to be something that a patient can do or any person can do in a consistent fashion that they enjoy. I never want somebody to get burnt out on this.
And obesity, as we've labeled it, which I don't think is a disease personally, and high BMIs and all these other things, I personally think we've missed the boat on that one. For those that want to lose weight, how do you see those clients also, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, I do. And it's funny because I'm personally somebody that dealt with eating disorders in my youth. So this whole idea of like weight loss and stuff, I actually had to really do a lot of work myself on reframing a lot of this in my head and really understanding this from a health perspective. And, I feel very fortunate that's no longer something that affects me. But it really does change now how I approach my patients that are trying to quote unquote lose weight. Because most of the time what they're coming in for is fat loss. Now, when it comes to fat loss, I actually have a reel on this on my Instagram. We first have to understand like what is fat in the first place, right? Like what is it doing on your body? And for me, it really classifies as three things. One being it is a way for your body to store excess energy because you might need it. Number two, it's actually a way for your body to dilute toxins. So the solution to pollution is dilution, right? If you're taking a lot of toxic stuff, your body wants more surface area for that to be stored, right? So it's not affecting you as much. Third thing, and this surprises a lot of people, fat tissue is not just this blubber that sits on our body. It's actually an active endocrine organ. It secretes hormones and hormone conversion actually happens here. So a lot of the time I get, it's the women who are middle-aged that come in postmenopausal and they're like, I just somehow grew this tire around my waist. What the heck happened here? And I have to explain to them, well, It's, again, your body's intelligent response to the fact that your estrogen production stopped when you hit menopause. And now your body wants more surface area to do something called aromatization, which is the process of turning other hormones into estrogen. So when we think about all of these three things as the basis of why is your body even holding on to fat in the first place, you take a detailed history, you talk to the patient about what their life is like, and you make the changes that are appropriate to why they have the fat on their body in the first place. And this becomes so effective. Now, the first one is usually the most challenging, which is this idea that the body is storing excess energy in the form of fat because it thinks that you might be starving. Now, why would the body think you're starving, especially if you're eating food? Well, if you're eating low nutrient food, standard American diet, if you have a history of yo-yo dieting where your body actually doesn't feel safe with releasing this excess fat because it thinks, oh my gosh, we might go into a famine at any point in time, of course, it's going to keep some excess on the body, right? So sometimes we actually have to do some metabolism retraining with women, which means letting them finally eat. Sometimes these women, they come to me in their 50s and they've never eaten before. They've never had that ribeye with the juicy fat around the edge of it. And they've never really been able to finally do this. And they think I'm crazy. But when their body starts trimming up to the way that they like it, they have more energy, they're sleeping better, their skin's clearing up, and it's juicy again, like it was in their youth. They're like, okay, maybe there's something to this, right? And almost all of the time, if you give the body the right things that it needs to heal and be in a healthy state, it will just release the fat. And that's what I would say. Your body's just releasing it. You're not losing it again. And we're actually approaching the body in a very loving way versus a way that, oh my gosh, I don't like this fat on me, so I want to get rid of it. It's no, I love my body enough to push it into a state of ultimate health so that it just gently releases this. I no longer need it anymore, right?
So always go back to the law of attraction, the simplicity. I want to lose weight. Well, you're going to continue to want to lose weight. And so as long as you want to lose weight, it's going to be there. Being skinny is deadly in the universe. And I always say the simple answer is the one. We are simply fat because we're meant to be. The actual work to be skinny is deadly for most of all animals in the world. Yeah. So we are simply doing absolutely the wrong thing. So, but ultimately, fasting, I say, is the most amazing thing to truly lasting. And when you do this method that you've mentioned, you feel better, you feel brighter, you're positive in life. And when you're not depressed, when you feel great, well, you could go days without eating. What are your thoughts on fasting?
I love it. I've actually been an active faster for, many years. And it was something that, again, I started doing because I felt really good. The brain power. I mean, I'm in a fasted state right now. And I can frequently go 20 plus hours, with just some electrolytes, and I feel phenomenal, right? Pain reduces, energy is increased, brain power is increased. And I do love it. And I think that it's honestly really important for a lot of people because they've never been in that state. And a lot of healing happens in that state. So you can really accelerate a lot of what's happening for a patient underneath as far as kicking up into the autophagy, right? Getting rid of those senescent cells, and turning up all the heal and repair, utilizing excess energy stores on your body to, again, assist with the healing mechanism. Big proponent of fasting.
And I mean, I recommend the 23-in-1. I do my one meal over an hour. I think we these too many longer hours. I mean, for the last probably 3.5 million years or whatever that number is, finding food was not so simple. But what we do know today in our modern world, whether we ate 3 times a day or 6 times a day or 6 times a month, fasting is really, really important to healing the gut and then the rest of the body. What are your thoughts on and how do you discuss about supplements and vitamins and do you have any recommendations, and then also organ meats and things like that? What's your approach to that?
My general rule with supplements is that we use them strategically for a short duration to help us get to a target. It's never something that I want somebody on forever and ever, amen. And I think that that's irresponsible to say, oh yeah, you should just take, vitamin C every day, all the live long day forever and ever, or that everybody needs to be on vitamin D all the time to achieve these very narrow ranges. I don't think that that's appropriate either. Things that I do love giving people as a supplement, I love giving them electrolytes, minerals, things that most of us have been deficient in, that we need some degree of repletion, especially if we're coming off of these standard American diets. I don't really like to use herbs a lot, and I never, ever, ever prescribe fish oils. I think that it's there's a lot of research on the negatives of them, actually, and I actually don't think that that they do anything meaningful in the body. And I, realized that early on in my career. I definitely don't give anything to lower cholesterol or anything like that. And as far as organs go, I personally feel good when I have like 2 organ capsules every couple of days. And it just gives me enough of an energy boost. And again, I think it's because I was in such a depleted state for so many years, eating so many vegetables. I don't think everybody needs them. I think that if you want to, eat a little bit of raw liver here and there, if it feels good to you, fine. But I don't think that everybody needs them all of the time. And again, you got to be strategic with these things.
When you say electrolytes, what do you recommend in all of that?
I have a brand that I use, but I think for the most part, if somebody is going to replete them, you can do like at home, blends of just like your basic calcium, magnesium, potassium, whatever it is. There's like the LMNT drink that's going to give you some stuff too. I have one that I use. It's just called, I think it's Electrolyte Supreme or something like that. Again, just a different blend. But then I like using, oh, there you go. It's sparkling mineral water.
And there's other mineral waters out there. The likelihood we drank dirty water forever, which contained the dirt, which contained the minerals, right? Now we want ultra filtrated and radiated or light treated or something, right? Or
the bougie water,
right? Whatever it is. And so, obviously we're living longer and better maybe than we've ever lived, so. What's your thoughts on bone broth and that part of the bone marrow, bone broth, and things like that? How do you approach that? You think that's something important for us?
I think if you like it, you can include it. I think it's got great sources of certain amino acids like glycine and whatnot, and it's going to be a good source of collagen for some people as well. If it's something you want to include, great. Do I think you need to? Probably not.
I do say that there's so many things that we're inundated with in the carnivore world, the keto world, and whatever it is. It's so many things what you need to do, but ultimately, what do we need? We need a breath of fresh air every day, meditation and prayer, some water, probably less than we're drinking, and a smile on your face. But what are your thoughts on water consumption? How do you approach that? Because these are really, these are the simple things that we're all inundated with. So, and I'm going to just say, Dr. Solt, I am really, really impressed and grateful that you're here with us. And we have so many people that are enjoying this today. And we may get to a few questions from some of our leaders in the group. So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can dive into water and dive into questions, whatever your audience would prefer. So the water conversation is really interesting. So what a lot of people don't know is that water actually exists in 4 states, right? So we have water as vapor, we have water as liquid, and we have water as ice. But and this is what's really interesting. So in the human body, we all hear the term that we're made of 70% water. But if you cut somebody open, water doesn't come out, right? So how is it in the body? And it's actually in this 4th state of water that we call exclusion zone water, right? And this has to do with how the water is structured, how literally those OH bonds are structuring that water. And what's really fascinating is that structured water occurs in nature in various ways, right? So we can actually get structured water from something like raw milk or even in the fat tissue of animals. So that's ultimately consuming water in its structured state in the exclusion zone form is actually more hydrating to us than drinking water. And this is a fascinating study that was done. And it was how animals in nature are attracted to structured water or like vortex water. So you see it spinning. And this is why you'll see cats, for example, go after the toilet water instead of the water that's in their bowl because it's been vortexed and structured. Swear to God, right? Now, there
Yeah.
are, certain devices and stuff that you can buy that will quote unquote structure your water. But I think I'm personally understanding less and less that we actually just don't need to be drinking a ton of water as much as we need structured water, but then also as much as we need minerals to hold that water in our tissues, right? So this idea that, oh my gosh, everybody should have a reverse osmosis water system in their house and they should be drinking that is, a number of ounces equivalent to the number of pounds that you weigh, I think is completely insane because you're giving your body dead water and you're leaching minerals from your body by doing that, right? Reverse osmosis water is what we call an empty vector. It's actually going to pull in minerals to bind to it, and those are going to come from you. I mean, minerals, again, are so precious, right? Gold, silver, right? The precious minerals, precious metals. They're just as equally as precious in our physiology. So holding those in is going to be so much better. And I think that if you actually have adequate mineral levels and you're getting structured water from your food sources, that the amount that you actually need to drink goes down dramatically.
What's interesting, I'm the crazy man on the glycobiome.
Okay. I
And the
am so new to that term.
glycobiome, so the glycobiome, as most people don't know it, it's the sugar coating that coats every cell of your body. It coats the vascular system, and it coats the GI system. It coats the nervous system. It coats everything. It's a highly glycated glycans, not glycation. It's the sugars that are connected to the proteins that produce a mucinous layer that actually hold the majority of the water. So that in a septic state, it releases the water from it. So there's where the negatively charges actually hold on to the water. So when you cut open, the water doesn't spill out. And that's why when you eat a meat-based nutrition, you're actually getting the water within the cells that you and I can't even see. But the glycobiome is, like, to me, the most important component of the human body that almost
Nobody's
no one
talking
knows
about.
about.
Yes.
Nobody's talking about. And I've been talking about for a while now. The sugar, glucose, is not the fuel for the mitochondria. It's a precursor for fat in the liver, but ultimately glycans, and glucose is just another glycan. And so when you damage the glycans, the mucopolysaccharide layer in your bowels, you now remove a tremendous amount of the water stored in your body. So when you have an event, your body doesn't have the ability to release the water into the blood system to keep your blood vessels full. So what happens is, because we've destroyed our glycans and our mucopolysaccharide layer, the glycocalyx, we're screwed. And so when you eat a high plant-based diets are deadly. You're destroying the glycobiome, which is the only real reason sugar exists in our body, not for the mitochondrial energy. It's like such an interesting component. But these if you're going to go try to find the studies on all this stuff, it really speaks the words that aren't so simple for most of us to understand.
Yeah, you're right. To break down all of those concepts that you just listed, as far as even just the glycocalyx, the fact that there's this layer of, like, this gelatinous layer that actually holds water throughout our body. Like, you have to have so many levels of understanding to be able to just digest that. So I am picking up what you're saying. I think it's brilliant, and I definitely want to get that book. But it's hard for the average person.
Well, it's hard. Look, I always say, listen, we think MDs and DOs and any of PhDs are somehow smarter than everyone else. We're not. We're just as, listen, you were right about the fourth state of water. It's in the glycobiome. It's there. And so when we begin to realize the simplicity of this human story, but we're looking for the prospective randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study that someone's going to share with us, and it's going to give us the ultimate answer of the universe. We're screwed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you found, as I found, the simplicity of carnivore.
Yes. And that's one thing that I really do love is that it has made my life simple, even just to grocery shopping, to the amount, the brain power that I got back, not having to think about what's for dinner. I mean, you can't put a price on that. Like, give me a steak and I'm happy. Like, I don't have to think about that anymore. And it has allowed me so much more creativity in other aspects of my life because one, I'm firing better on all cylinders. And two, again, I bought that brain power. Like, to me, that's like, you can't even put a price tag or value on that. Like, that's the most important thing.
Well, there's always going to be the push for the right or the left, the top or the bottom. I mean, that's our nature as humanity, right?
Mhm.
Everyone believes they're right and everyone else is wrong. That's our nature, right? The brain is fight or flight or freeze.
Mhm.
That's it, right? It's really simplistic. The reptilian brain, for our infinite number of years of evolution, but this is amazing story. If you're miserable, start with working on the mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
And
agree.
I'm curious, how do you approach the mindfulness and helping people sort of reset the mental construct of their universe?
Oh gosh, it's so funny that you mentioned this because this is literally the first module of my like 6-month program with people is mindset, right? So we have to not only get to a different way of thinking, we have to unlearn a lot of things too. And part of what I teach people is exactly what you're saying. There is that amygdala response, which is our built-in safety mechanism over millions of years of evolution, right? And it's not bad per se. All it's trying to do is keep you safe. But to your brain that's untrained and again, very primitive, to that, it means whatever is familiar is safe, not what's actually good for you, good for your future self, good for your development, right? So this is why you see people that always, date the same horrible types of people, right? It's because it's familiar, but it's not necessarily good for you, but it's familiar. So
Right.
we have to the first thing is is acknowledging that and having this gratitude for your body and what it's trying to do for you, and then understanding that maybe this isn't quite serving me. And then that's when we get into the really juicy stuff, which is how do we now intentionally create a mindset that's going to serve us at our highest capacity. And then we have to get into the understanding of, okay, what's our conscious versus our subconscious mind? How do we again change our states, and how do we understand that there are two different types of thought processes happening here? And what I tell people is there's a voice in your head that's talking to you all the time, and then there's the one that's listening. And the one that's listening, you can actually get to overpower that part, the one that's talking to you all the time, and you can choose what it says. If you can't choose what something is saying, it's not you that's actually saying it. And understanding that we can actually take those pauses in those moments, which is hard. Nobody's perfect. We get 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, right? We can't control them all. But getting to the point where we can understand, oh, something's coming up and maybe this isn't what I want it to be saying, and I can pick something else. The power lies in that moment where you choose. And we can actually make our thoughts go with anything. So when we're going for the salad bar, we might think, oh yeah, the salad is familiar and it's supposed to be good for my gut, and I need the fiber and I need the roughage, right? And
Bacteria. I need more
I
bacteria in
have
my
to feed my
bowels.
microbiome, right? And then we can have that moment where we get to pause and we get to think, well, no, I'm going to go for that nice carving station where that steak is hiding out, and again, power in that pause and in that mindset. And sometimes I'll even go into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, right, where he basically starts by teaching that it's your personal reality that becomes your personality. And in order to make that transition over to a new personal reality, you ultimately have to change your personality, right? And that begins with our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, right? And they're all very interconnected. And the way that we can really accelerate this process is to step into a new feeling first, and your body will follow afterwards. So I'm with you. The mindset component is so important. So important.
Well, yeah, it is the first thing to work on. It's interesting how, modern focus, it's been on the body, and I think in the ancient focus, it's always on the mind. and really, so much is get in the gym and get moving. But really, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? Which ultimately feeds the mind. What are you thinking, right? And so you really, as you said, the mindset is critical. And I know for me, as a Western trained standard American doctor, I integrated mindfulness 20 years ago in our practice: yoga, massage, acupuncture, meditation, and prayer. And then I kind of fell into this paleo keto carnivore world. I'm like, what? And so really it is the trifecta of working on what you put in the mind, what you put in the mouth, and how you move the miracle master machine in all of this. And ultimately, what are your hardest and I really appreciate you. Are you okay on time to keep going a few more minutes? And
Totally fine. Yep.
what is your hardest challenge in your practice?
Wow, that is a good question. Honestly, I think that the biggest challenge is, how do I even put this? Is getting the patients to buy in right away. They get there, right? And I want to shorten the time between when they're in here and when they're feeling good. That's my whole goal, right? I want to shorten the time that till you feel better. Because I want you to feel better. I want you to have this, right? I want you to be on the other side. And if I could just get them to come in ready to hear, like, hey, this is the diet that I'm going to put you on, like, be prepared. And I think this is really, why I'm starting to kind of switch my Instagram and, that public facing stuff over to putting all this out there, so that people are coming in with expectations set that this is going to be the conversation, and you must be ready for it, because I ultimately want you to heal, right? Like, you're, as a physician, like, we don't get into this and get into the many years of school and the figures of debt that we, for the student loans and everything like that, because we don't want to help people, right? And I want to get you there as fast as I can, because again, my goal is always goodbye, and I don't have the physical number of hours to help literally every single person in this world. I would love to, but some of that is come to me ready to make the change and be prepared to do that. So again, the public education, doing these types of interviews, putting the content out there, and just educating. It's so funny. In naturopathic medicine, we have our naturopathic principles. And one of them is the concept of docere, which is doctor as teacher. And really just taking this position of educating people so that you empower them, right? Knowledge is power. And another point that I wanted to make to your statement of what we're taking in on a daily basis, part of that education is that everything that you consume is part of your diet and therefore part of you. And I know you don't like the word diet, but that's everything you consume, whether it's the music you listen to, it's the things that you watch on TV, all of that's coming in, all of that's, affecting you and your subconscious and your decision making and how you think about things. And if you're constantly consuming content that is going to put you in this negative state, well, that's what you're going to have afterwards, right? So if you're watching like these crazy war movies with explosions and violence, you're going to have those things in your what it's better to, like you were saying, read those informational books, expand your mind, go with these concepts of things that are going to ultimately benefit you, instead of just entertain you.
And I think it's interesting, the size of your video screen or the size of your library. And ultimately, I've been reading Robin Sharma's book, The 5 a.m. Club. And so I started my 5 a.m. meetups, which is all about, we're a tribe, humanity. And, my sister died at 52. My best friend died of cancer at 52. Sarah Hallberg just died of lung cancer at 50. And, it's interesting that someone mentioned to me, so I sort of said, but you're skinny, Dr. Kiltz. And I never label skinny or fat. I always label with perfect you be. And I'm not here to make you fat or skinny or good or bad or right or wrong. You're in charge of you and no one else. So I think that's really the most important part of this. But what I've learned is Ashley asked about, I love meat, but I love my salad. But ultimately, I call salad nature's toilet paper. It contains the microbes that ferment in your bowels and ultimately damage your glycobiome in your bowels and help the microbes flourish and make alcohol in your bowels that will mess you up. And so ultimately, for our last 3.5 million years, we're hunters and killers of grass eaters. And if you didn't eat the grass eater, you were dead, or you were the meal. And I know it seems so radical and it seems so wrong. Here I am, an Italian, loved food and loved all that, but I don't know about you, but I suffered, and I was in my, since I was a kid, I had migraines and I had bowel problems. Did anyone figure out that maybe you're eating the wrong meals for lions?
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm Italian as well. My dad, right from Italy, I'm originally from Canada, so he came to Canada when he was 16. So grew up a lot with the traditional, pastas, and to his credit, he did do a lot of his own like cured meats and stuff. So we always had that, which was nice. But again, a lot of the heavy carb-based things. And as a kid, I had the worst acne. I had to get glasses when I was in 5th grade. I had digestive issues. I had to have braces when I was really young. I think I'm missing like 8 adult teeth because I don't think my jaw formed properly. And, nothing against my parents. They're amazing parents. They did so many things right, but it just wasn't talked about back then that diet could be a problem, and I feel like I'm in a great state now, but I feel like, how much better could things have been had I had a different diet,
Well, it is interesting. And our cultures are cultures, and we still need to enjoy our cultures, just not all the time. And cured meat, I bet, is really healthy for us with its lot of fat. And Josh commented that it wasn't an insult, and I didn't take it that way, Josh. By the way, I do have fat. So the truth is that fat is where it's at. And so really it's critical to understand that skinny in a famine is deadly. What are the odds that we're going to live through a famine? Well, they might be higher than we know. And so I appreciate all the comments, by the way, even when it's like, it's like a little bit of, we're poking each other. It's okay. We're having fun in this, aren't we? All right. Dr. Sabrina Solt, how do all of our listeners and watchers get inspired to find you out there?
Yeah, I think the platform I'm most active on is Instagram, and just at Dr. Solt, DrSolt. I have a YouTube channel that I don't do a ton on, but it's definitely on my project list. And then my website is stemcelltherapypro.com. So for clinical stuff, that's all there. But as far as just general content, staying in touch, Instagram is my preferred social.
And the beauty of social medicine is the way. We learn so much by listening, watching, sharing. Who's your favorite inspiration out there in the sort of the social media world that's helping all of us, do you think?
So one of my good friends, actually, Dr. Tina Moore. I don't know if you know her. She's probably one of my best friends, and I watched her grow her social over, gosh, I want to say about 4 or 5 years or so, and just seeing how she really like her heart is so pure. Like, just knowing her as a human, she has the purest heart. She really just wants what's best for humanity, and she takes such a strong stance in her delivery and is not sugarcoating it for anybody. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because she's right now really going on a thing about anti-sugar, because her goal is, like, she wants healthy, resilient humans in this world with her. And I love her for it. And she's, if your followers don't know her, she's certainly there. But, come prepared, because she is not sugarcoating. Pardon me?
What's her name again?
Dr. Tina Moore. She's just at Dr. Tina, DrTyna, on Instagram. And she's phenomenal.
We'll bring her on. We need to communicate and converse with, again, yes. We're all co-inspired. That's really it. Dr. Solt's father, Orlando, is the person that has got me interested in the carnivore lifestyle. Alan Dunphy. And that's the beauty of this. We're all a family. This isn't, it's, again, whichever, there's no sides here, right? It really is oneness. And we invite all vegan, vegetarians, Mediterraneans, pescatarians, everyone is part of this human journey. And if you're suffering, Dr. Solt, SOLT, really is sharing some amazing ideas and energy. Check her out, Instagram. She's building her YouTube, and I know she has so much to share with. So thank you, Dr. Solt, for joining us today. We can go
Thank
for another
you.
10 hours. I know it. Love everyone. Thank you for joining us. More to come every day. Dr. Rob Kiltz and conversations with Keto Kiltz. Bye.
Bye.